Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Risenmay, and I'm here with Douglas Mance, Director of EMSL. Welcome to this webinar for large-scale research at EMSL. And I wanted to first welcome you, but also make sure that you can hear us. So in the control window that you have, there should be a chat. And if you could just go ahead and say, yes, we hear you, or yes, that would be great. So we can make sure that this is coming through like it should. Yes, we're getting good indications. All right, very good. To start off, we like to get to know who's listening in and who's tracking along with us. So we do have a poll question to start. So another quick way to make sure that we know who we're speaking with. Could you go ahead and submit an answer to this poll question, and we'll get the answers in real time here as we get going. While you're doing that, I'll just note that Douglas here next to me has started as EMSL director not too long ago, just within the last, was it 6 months or so?
Almost 9.
Almost 9, so we're glad to have him on board. You'll get to hear from him in a second. It looks like we've got a good mix of answers. We're closing the poll, looks like, yeah. Great, and so yeah, a variety of graduate students to postdoc, and faculty members, as well as engineers and scientists. So thanks for giving us those answers. It helps us to know where you're at, and maybe we can address these interests a little bit better for you. We have one more question, 2 questions, another poll. We want to make sure we know if you've ever been through this process before. And if so, were you an author of a proposal before as a PI or co-PI? So if you could answer those real quick. Again, that helps us to kind of adjust our the information that we're sharing with you today, and maybe prepare for other proposals in the future. Looks like we have about an even mix of those that have been through the process, so good. Some of this will be new to you, and great. Thanks for those answers. I'm going to close that poll and keep going. Okay, great. Well, here's Douglas, and we're glad to have you. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce us to what EMSL is?
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. So EMSL, the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory, is a Department of Energy Office of Science, Office of Biological and Environmental Research user facility that provides experimental and computational resources and expertise to the scientific community. This means that staff and scientists from around the world can use our resources to do their scientific research. But we are not a fee-for-service facility or a contract research organization per se. Rather, instead, access is generally free for those who intend to publish and have an approved proposal.
Okay, great. And so it's more than just instruments?
Absolutely. EMSL is actually a combination of in-house scientific expertise, cutting-edge next-generation instruments, and unique facilities that have been designed to strengthen collaboration among scientists. These combinations of elements create 6 foci of domain expertise, which we refer to as integrated research platforms that you should be able to see on your screen now. And these are designed to enable multidisciplinary team research to address the increasingly complex science that the Office of Biological and Environmental Research is pursuing. These IRPs, as they're colloquially referred to, also extend to include our external users and other contributors who collectively form a community of practitioners and share tools, codes, samples, data, and know-how. And through these platforms, we enable users to work in new ways and foster new areas of research and education and training.
Okay, good. And it helps to see on the screen where you can find more information on the website, of course. So, by the way, those the slides that you see, the recording of this session includes the same screens that you're seeing, and so you'll be able to get back to that URL pretty easily after we're done. So Douglas, does a user need to really know how to use an instrument if they're going to, do they need to visit so that they can operate the instruments in person?
Yes and no. So you don't always need to visit, although we can run the instruments and perform the science and do the data analyses for you. It's always very helpful, though, to come out at least once and meet the team of scientists that are going to be working with you on your project, as they can often help define your approach a little bit more roundly than if it was just kind of remote. And in addition, I've found that the value of being here in person has without fail led to new ideas of research and areas of exploration after you come and meet and have more intimate discussions with our staff of scientists and experts here that really can only happen in kind of a face-to-face setting.
Good. And you spoke about expertise that's shared. Does the user need to be an expert themselves in that
No.
area of research?
Absolutely not. EMSL and scientists are leading experts, and we can help answer all your questions and refine your approach to address your research, as well as help interpret the results that you get, which can often be complex.
Okay. Can they request more than one instrument to be used in their research, even if they don't know how to operate those instruments?
Absolutely. So we're here to help you solve your science questions, and we recognize the importance of integrating data from different and often orthogonal analytical techniques. So it's a great opportunity to actually explore our instrument platforms that you may not be familiar with. And our staff can help show you how the data that is coming from these different techniques can be assimilated to really understand and pull more out of the science that you're trying to do. And in addition, we can even provide wholly new avenues for looking at scientific problem solving using analytical techniques that previously maybe you weren't aware of or had considered.
Okay, well that's great. We're covering a lot of ground already. Getting into the science area next. We're going to go ahead and shift gears a little bit as we get into more details. Douglas is going to leave us, and we'll have two other guests join the webinar. We have what you're seeing on the screen right now is a view of the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see this recording there at the YouTube channel, like we've had other videos featured. By the way, we'll post this probably within the day, so you'll be able to come quickly back and catch up on anything you might have missed. So stay tuned for that. We are now joined, it's just made a switch. We are now joined by Scott Baker and Nancy Hess, and they are the science leads. So we're glad to have you back again to cover a little more detail about these science areas that I'm sure the audience is interested in. This proposal is called it's focused on the science areas, so maybe you could each share some details specifically with what that means. Maybe Scott, you could go first.
Sure. I lead the functional and systems biology area, or biology for short, and I'm interested and EMSL's interested in understanding how we understand biological systems at the molecular level. We are interested in systems that are relevant to DOE research, microbes, the environment, fungi, plants, biotechnology, and really we can do global types of experiments to get at all the proteins or metabolites that are involved in various biological processes relevant to DOE.
Okay, great. Nancy?
Yeah, so I lead the environmental transformations and interactions area, and BER's interest in this area is really obtaining a predictive understanding of the terrestrial surface and the subsurface ecosystems from the bedrock canopy to the canopy, and really what is the exchange between the terrestrial and the land surface and across different interfaces in the terrestrial ecosystem. So there's a goal that's really looking at the mechanisms of individual processes that kind of operate within a particular ecological system or across the boundaries and their interfaces. And then there's another focus area that's looking at cycling of nutrients or transport and transformation of contaminants, and as well as atmospheric aerosols. And then the third bullet is really trying to bring a systems understanding. So how are these individual processes and mechanisms coupled together? And how does that play out in a more holistic view of the science?
Great, thank you. Now, as we're getting into more detail, you might have questions along the way, and feel free to use the chat window to add those questions in. There is a portion of this webinar when we'll turn to your questions, so we'll be able to address them. I do have a few of the questions that we've commonly heard from folks, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask a few of these. What sort of science questions are asked by researchers wanting to use EMSL, and can I submit ideas that don't fit within those science areas?
It's a good question, and really we're focused on BER science, so that's nutrient cycling through the environment and biotechnology for biofuels and production of biochemicals, and really that's the main overarching area, and then we have specific call bullets that really should direct the users in the proposals that they submit. You can submit outside of that area, but we do score on these criteria, so that's really important. There are two actual evaluations. One is BER mission, and then one is the science area call, so those both get scores. You can see a list of science highlights and previously performed user projects on our website. We'll provide a link to that page.
Okay. So Nancy, Scott mentioned that your science areas are built around your program sponsor. How can I find out more about BER's mission and what they're interested in now?
Yeah, well, going to their BER webpage is a great area resource. And on there, you'll find links to their workshop reports and also documents from their advisory committee that really specify their research interests. And so up on the screen here are several links. Another really timely place to check out is their recent call for funding opportunities, because those will definitely highlight the areas that they're interested in pursuing research.
Yeah, so similarly, I was going to ask, how do you come up with the topics each year for this particular call?
So you can see the topic areas up there for functional and systems biology, and it's really an iterative process where we come up with some ideas that are relevant to BER's research. We work with our program managers back at headquarters, and we also circulate it internally and really come up with a list of topic areas for users to propose to.
Okay, Nancy, any other input you want to share?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great place to look. We're also interested in comments that we have from advisory committees, both for BER and our own. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So, Scott, someone might ask, why should I take the time to put a proposal together? What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, EMSL is a place with cutting edge capabilities and resources, and as Douglas mentioned, it is free to the user. The Department of Energy funds us to work with users, and so it's a great opportunity to accelerate and improve the impact, or enlarge the impact of your lab's research by using our cutting edge capabilities. That's a big reason, and it's not an onerous proposal process. It most is 4 pages. And there's some supplementary information needed. If there's a computational proposal, only 1 additional page is needed that outlines the approach and software to be used, and then a justification for the hours on our high performance computing platform. So it's a great opportunity to access the expertise here. So it's not only the equipment, but it's the expertise, and it's all under one roof. So you can send us a single sample and then we can analyze it in multiple different ways.
Great. So let's talk a little more process. Thank you. You mentioned how long the proposal document looks like. Nancy, what's required to actually put that proposal together and submit it?
Yeah, most of the proposal is assembled online. And so if you go to the website, the first place you want to go is For Users tab up at the top of the screen. And then once you go there, there'll be proposal calls and opportunities. And within that, you'll see on the right-hand side, this annual and special calls for proposals. There you'll see actually 2 opportunities, a large-scale call that we're discussing now, as well as the ficus call. And you can propose to either one or both for your research. And then once you assemble the package that Scott mentioned, you go back up to the user portal to do the actual submission. And over in that additional information call, there's tons of information and templates that tell you the type of information you need to assemble in order to create your proposal, as well as I believe there are sample proposals to look at to make sure that you're getting all those elements.
Okay, the samples are good.
Yeah.
What if these proposals, the person submitting the proposal doesn't know what instruments they actually need? as part of their research?
So the most important thing they can do is to contact us beforehand, and like at least a week beforehand, if not even longer. And we can help identify the individual instruments that you need, as well as suggest complementary approaches that might really help get that additional information they need to make great conclusions from their research.
Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you. And part of that proposal includes an appendix section with details about requested resources. So what is this used for, Scott?
So that appendix is used to help us calculate the amount of resources that each project needs. We have a finite amount of resources, funding, time on instruments, and so we need to allocate that appropriately. And so that's really a critical part, is to outline the scope of the proposal. And that helps both internally and the reviewers to understand what's being requested.
That's good. So then what's your acceptance rate? How many proposals actually are accepted?
In the past couple of years, it's been close to 30%. So it's fairly competitive. We have leading experts from all over the world submit. And so, but 30% is about what we've been averaging.
Okay, who makes that decision?
We have a panel of external researchers, scientists that come here, and I coordinate that panel. We review the science of the proposals, and then at the end, a consensus ranking is reached, and then we're able to fund over a certain score that's a cutoff.
Okay, good. All right, what are the secrets to a successful proposal?
So it's really taking the time to actually prepare your proposal, and contacting us beforehand, appreciating that you are competing with leading scientists internationally. Well-written proposals do well, having well-defined hypotheses, and clearly delineating how the access to EMSL is going to enable your research. Scott, do you have anything?
Specifically to add to that, we have, I think working with our staff is absolutely critical, and really coordinating with the BER and DOE research mission is important, and making sure that there's a hypothesis. I mean, traditional proposal kinds of things are really important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, good. A lot of people have science questions. There must be more to a successful proposal than just having a good question, though.
Yeah.
You included knowing BER's mission is key.
So I would say that responding to the call bullets is actually really important. The panel really does look at the call, look at the responses, and look how the two match. And so that's an absolutely critical part.
Okay, good. Should be pretty clear then. And then what common mistakes reduce the proposal's chance for success?
Well, missing the deadline is kind of a no-brainer. So make sure you get it in on time. And actually, it's due March 2nd at 11 p.m., not midnight. As Scott's mentioned and I mentioned, working with the EMSL staff really makes a difference, because then the panel really understands that you've coordinated your research with the best EMSL has to offer. And then the other thing I would say is not clearly delineating how are you going to use the results you get from EMSL to answer the question. So you might be collecting data, but how are you going to use that data to answer the question? Scott?
So I'd add that, how is it that EMSL is absolutely critical to moving this research forward and increasing impact? That's a really important part of this. We're not here to do research that you can do with your own core facility or in your own lab. We really want to enable researchers to take that next step, to go beyond what they could do normally.
Okay, that's great. I do believe questions are coming in, which we're still going to keep queued up for the question time. So keep them coming. We're glad that you have questions. Continuing on this proposal, the parameters of the proposal, what's the typical proposal funded for? Is there a dollar limit to what they can ask for?
So these funds, there's no dollar limit per se, and I should mention that the funds are again allocated for our staff to work on these proposals, and so those allocations at EMSL range from anywhere from $8,000 to $150,000, depending on the resources that are requested and the labor associated with those.
Okay, great. And how long does the typical project run?
The proposals typically run for 2 years. For the large-scale research. Occasionally, the panel may recommend that it go through a trial period of 1 year, just as a proof of principle, and then move forward. Yeah. Okay.
Did the funds include travel for the researcher to come here to EMSL?
No, they don't. The researcher must supply their own travel, prepare their samples, or whatever it is that we're going to be analyzing. That happens in the researcher's lab or in coordination with us here. But the funding is really for our staff to work with the users.
Okay, great. Good. Well, that's good information, and we are ready for questions from you. I have one that came in through the chat room, and so I'll just bring this up. Scott, you mentioned earlier that you coordinate the panel of review, and the question is, do the two science areas compete against each other in that review?
No, the two science areas have their own separate panels, so Nancy coordinates the other panel, and Nancy and I work really closely together to make sure that we are not overly focused in one area or the other. We have a good spread. Our portfolio is pretty broad within that BER realm of mission relevant science.
Okay, great. It's a good question. Thank you. While we're waiting on any others that come in, I've got another one. Can we reiterate the deadline? March
2nd at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Pacific Standard Time, that's right. Thank you. And then I think we covered this, but let's just be sure. Do I need to know how to operate the equipment that I'm requesting?
Absolutely not. We have experts here that can help on elements of sample prep, instrument operation, and also data analysis. We really love working and teaming with the users.
Okay, great. What other benefits does EMSL provide?
I think the staff are really, and their interactions with the staff is an incredible benefit. It's kind of unique in its role as a user facility, where there's really a lot of interaction between the visiting scientists, the users that come here, and our existing staff. I'm sorry, the staff that are resident here. And that collaboration can lead to more in-depth data analysis. We can absolutely help prepare text for manuscripts, and it's a much deeper collaboration than I think you'll find at most user facilities.
Okay, great. So yeah, go ahead and keep asking questions if you have any other out there. We have a few others that we've heard, and we have them to go through as well. Is there an expectation for large-scale proposals to involve researchers from multiple institutions?
I would say that's not an expectation. We can work with single PIs, but we also love working with teams, and teaming is really part of EMSL, and it's the people that work here that do the research and run the instruments love to work in teams. And so it's whether it's a single researcher or a multi-team proposal, it doesn't matter to us. We're just excited to team with the users.
Glad to have them. Yeah. Okay, good. We did get another question in. So how does the scope of large-scale projects compare to those of the general anytime basis proposed projects?
Yeah. The large scales we stated earlier typically run for 2 years. So that's a large request in resources and a very involved collaboration with our staff. The sort of anytime proposals or proof of principle proposals are typically limited to 30 days. And it's typically you're trying something out on a particular instrument to see if there's sufficient sensitivity or if your samples are going to work on that instrument. So it's really not intended to be a research effort. The other way it can be used, however, though, is to generate like a figure for a publication or an image or something like that. So it's pretty superficial interaction.
Good. Thanks for that question. That's good. Next one is, when is it appropriate or recommended to include EMSL personnel as collaborators? Should that be established prior to the proposal submission? And how do you define collaborators versus needing staff support?
Mm-hmm.
That's three questions.
Yeah.
All related. I think each proposal is different, and so as Nancy mentioned, and I think we both mentioned, working with our staff during the proposal process is important. They do not need to be listed as submitters of the proposal. I think there is a section where you can say who you worked with, but they're not officially users of the proposal or users as counted for the proposal. Definitely defining how you're going to work with EMSL prior to proposal submission is recommended, because just anecdotally we found that some of the strongest proposals are those that really have that laid out, how you're going to work with EMSL, where the handshakes and as far as data and analysis goes. And then how do you define collaborators versus needing staff support? I think that's collaborators definitely contribute to the analysis or the developing the proposal, the ideas in the proposal. So that's a collaboration versus, say, staff support. Maybe how do I log on to the high performance computing resource, or maybe technical questions versus questions that really, or contributions that really help steer or define the research. So I think that's a pretty typical definition just in science in general, and the same goes here. I think it's an ongoing conversation with users.
So when I heard that question, I had a slightly different take. I think for the proposal, for the EMSL proposal process, a collaborator is a funded participant on that project. So if you have if one of the EMSL staff is actually funded by you, then they would be listed as a collaborator on your proposal. But if they are not, and an EMSL staff is helping you design the work at EMSL, then you can list them as a point of contact, but they would not be listed as a collaborator.
Good. Thank you for the clarifications. And then another question I have is there an expectation that a modeling component needs to be part of the research in addition to experimentation work?
No, there isn't. Now, officially, we find that some of the best science, though, often has a strong coupling between the modeling and the experiment, but there isn't a necessity to request computational resources at EMSL as part of your large-scale project. We do have a great variety of computational expertise here, both in terms of modeling, simulation, data visualization, and so there are a lot of resources that you should consider, but it's not a requirement.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions come in at this time, so I've got another. But what's the big difference between large-scale EMSL research and the FICUS research?
So large-scale EMSL research is EMSL-only research. So you're using only or requesting only the resources available at EMSL. FICUS is our program for user facilities working together, and we've had a lot of success in the past, for example, with the Joint Genome Institute as a partner in the FICUS proposal, where the user proposes to use capabilities at multiple user facilities in a single application, and that is, for example, genome sequencing in JGI and proteomics and microscopy at EMSL. It would be an example. There is a website, and you can delve into more about FICUS and certainly email us with questions.
Okay, thank you. And I think we're gonna just have one last question. I saw that the FICUS call allowed the use of samples from NEON. Can I request the same for my large-scale proposal?
Yeah, yes, you can. Now, you would have to do that as kind of on your own. We have the arrangement through NEON only through the FICUS call, and that allows us and NEON to coordinate, making sure that the samples that you're going to use are actually available through like a letter of intent. So if you do want to include NEON samples in your large-scale call, it would be beneficial to you to have a letter from them in your proposal package stating that you can have access to those samples.
Okay,
so,
good.
yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
I think we're ready to close this webinar, it looks like. Okay, great. If you have other questions, I want to thank Nancy and Scott for being here. Of course, Douglas as well. Nancy and Scott are ready to receive those questions from you. There's their information. And again, this contact information, all these slides that you saw during the webinar are part of the recording. And so you'll be able to easily jot those down at another time if you go back and look at the video all over again. Pause on the screen that you need. There are other URLs there that you can follow along and get more information to proposal guidance, peer review criteria, and tips. And we do have one last poll to part with as we close this. If you don't mind giving us just a little bit more information, it helps us as we plan for other webinars and other information that you're still in need of, maybe at a general basis as well as this opportunity. So again, thank you. Thanks to our collaborators that helped us organize this and manage the conversation with you. We're glad that you're interested. We hope that you have good success in your proposal, and let us know if you have any more. Thanks a lot.